All right, let's get started. Thank you, Michelle, for being here. Hopefully, we'll have a few more join as we go along this evening so we can have a discussion with a few people. Um, my name is Dave Shipley. I'm going to be facilitating this course. This is 211. Hopefully, you're at the right place. I always like to ask if anybody, this is their first time in a course like this. So, just you, Michelle, is this your first online course or is this old hat? You've done this before. All right, good. So I'll try not to make this too um, elementary today. We need to go over some of the basic expectations of a course like this, an online course, just in case we have some people who are new to the online platform. But for most of you, this should be a repeat. There are a few differences about this course. You may have already noticed some of them, some things that are missing from this course that are always in other courses that you may have taken before. So, Michelle, what are you studying? What's your degree that you're going for through the school? Business management, great. So almost everything we cover, obviously, in a course like this is going to apply to what you're trying to study. Sometimes, I'll have folks who feel like they're taking this class because it's required and trying to get through it, like we are with all our classes. But particularly this one, sometimes they say, "Well, I don't know if this can really, help me in what I'm doing with this particular major." But this class, every week we're learning about things that really should be helpful if you effort them, and should be something that you can take into the workplace, but also just take into life in general. Should be a good opportunity, as we've already started on the discussion board this week, to kind of do some self-assessments and see if there are areas for improvement, see if there are areas that you can continue to focus on that happen to be strengths already for you. So Michelle, thank you for being here, and we'll try to make it interesting this evening as well as every week. The biggest thing that we want to accomplish every week during the session is just to make sure that you feel perfectly comfortable with that week's coursework. So just make sure that you all feel like you're confident that you'll do just great on the coursework for that week. This particular course, that's a little different because there are not tests or quizzes. There are not assignments per se. There's just the discussion board each week. So we have to be careful that we do a great job on the discussion board to help, obviously, our grade in a class like this. A little different than normal. So, Michelle, I'm curious, have you ever had a class that didn't have quizzes or assignments prior to this one? I've taught a lot of business classes, a lot of finance classes online, and this is the only one that I'm familiar with that doesn't have assignments or quizzes. There are a few of the courses that I teach that don't have assessments, but most all of them have assignments. So this is a little bit different. Take the discussion board for this class much more seriously than maybe you have in other classes. Maybe you already do, but really focus on it in this one because that's where your grade's going to come from, is the weekly, or those weekly discussions. So put a lot of effort into it. Treat it like it's an assignment, assessment, discussion all in one, right? Put that extra time in, do the studying, get some references, research out the topic, and make sure that you've got the expectations for the discussion board fulfilled each week. All right. So let's talk about a few housekeeping items. Shouldn't be a lot here, especially because this is a different class. As I mentioned earlier, class expectations and requirements for this class are a little bit different than normal, right, Michelle? Because there's not quizzes and there are not assignments. However, of course, you've got your daily checkpoints and you've got your weekly discussion board, and you've even got a discussion board in week 4. So be careful on that one. A lot of classes don't have discussion boards in week 4 or any kind of assignment. This class, we will have some graded coursework that will happen in week 4. Not a final, but we will have some graded coursework. So be careful on that. Welcome, Tasha. Thanks for joining in tonight. We're just going over some of the basic expectations of the course, and then we'll go over into some content and just make sure that you're ready for this week's discussion board. You may have already started it, but thank you for being here. Oh, no worries. We're glad to have you. Michelle's especially glad because then I don't have to just pick on her tonight and ask her all the questions, right, Michelle? Yay, somebody else is here. Okay, so anyway, thanks, Tasha, for being here. So as far as this class is concerned, about 15% of your score will come from checkpoints, and the rest of your grade, the lion's share of your grade, will come from discussion board posts for each week. So most classes, the discussion board is worth about 6% of your grade each week, so about 60 points out of 1,000 that you have in a course. In this particular class, the discussion board each week is worth over 200 points. So you can see each week's discussion board is worth almost 20% of your grade or more. And so I just strongly encourage you, with everything I can beg you and plead you to take seriously the discussion boards, because I have to grade them according to the instructions. You'll see that the instructions are very detailed in this class about the discussion board. They give you exactly what we want to be talking about and discussing, especially for your main post. And they also, as far as the minimum expectations, say, hey, you got to have at least 100 words, in that main post. You got to have at least 50 in your responses. So they've got to be more substantive responses maybe than in other classes that you've had. And for good reason, right? Because they're worth so much more than a normal discussion board in your other classes. Okay. So any questions about class expectations, requirements for this class? You've got daily checkpoints like you normally do. You've got the weekly discussion boards, but a little bit different on some other fronts as far as not having some of the other stuff that you usually have with other courses. Okay, so if you have any questions, go back to the syllabus. It does walk through, the course content, talk about the different discussion boards, how they'll be graded. Each weekly discussion has a lot of instruction and minimum expectation information. So if you have any questions or concerns, you can refer back to those as well. Or you can just zip me an email or give me a quick phone call if you've got any concerns or questions about what is expected. So how do you have success in a class like this? It's like any other class. Stay consistent week to week. Don't get behind, because that sometimes catches up to us. I like to say, and I've been teaching for 5 years online, that if something bad can happen in week 4 of one of these mods, like a family situation, family drama, or computer breakdown, or somebody getting injured or sick or something like that, it will, right? For some strange reason, the world conspires against us sometimes, and that week 4, sometimes we have just significant life issues come up, right? I don't know if either of you have had that happen, but if you put that stuff off, right? If you put all your work off and say, well, I can get it all done, and he accepts late work, it just inevitably at some point you just run out of time, right? And you just can't get the class done. And these classes are expensive enough and they're hard enough, and it's important enough for you to stay on track as far as your degree, that I just strongly encourage you, obviously, to stay up to date. To keep up on things, to not put everything off so that you're scrambling in week 4 and just hoping that there aren't any issues or problems that come up. So that should be pretty straightforward. That's consistent with other classes that you've probably been through and your experiences in other classes. I actually got my master's degree through Stevens Henniger just recently, a second master's degree. And I've been saying that for a long time, and then all of a sudden it was happening to me, right? Sometimes when I'd put things off or get a little bit behind on my coursework, all of a sudden, something would come up with family or with one of my kids or something like that, and just put you behind. I appreciate that, Tasha. It was a lot of fun actually for me to get that degree, and the biggest thing that I wanted to make sure and do is experience it, right? So I've been teaching on the online side for quite a while, but I had never taken an online class before I started teaching online. All my my bachelor's degree and my master's degree before were live classes, and so it was a great experience to kind of feel how you guys feel and experience the things that you guys experience as you're going through these different mods so fast, right? I mean, these things just zip right by, fly right by, and it's easy to get behind if you don't stay on top of things. So anyway, that's why I mentioned that. So as far as success is concerned in a class like this, just complete your work, follow the instructions, take the discussion boards in this particular class more seriously than maybe you have in the past, put more effort into them. And as far as success in general, if you want an A from the class, I'm not going to be the type of professor that keeps you from the grade that you want, okay? So if you're looking for an A from this class or looking to just pass the class, you're going to be able to do that without a problem. I'm not going to bend any rules. I'm not going to go outside of what the school will allow me to do. I'm not just going to let you pass because you're nice or something like that. But if you'll put the effort in, this will be a class that you can get the grade you want. There won't be a reason that holds you back. Even if you find yourself a little behind of the grade that you want when we get closer to the end, I'm a strong advocate of you being in touch with me, us communicating, and us finding a plan or creating a plan for you to get the grade that you want if you're willing to put the effort into it, right? So that doesn't mean that you don't turn anything in and then week 4 you get in touch with me and say, hey, I'd really like an A from the class. What can I do? I'm going to say, well, turn in all your work, right? That's always step 1. Turn in all your work, follow the instructions. But step 2, if you've turned in all your work and followed the instructions, done your best, and you still feel like you're a little bit off of the grade that you want, then we can come up with something creative if you're willing to put in the effort to get the grade that you need or want from the class. So keep that in mind. It's something that I'll probably reiterate in week 4. Prior to week 4, we don't really consider those kind of things, right? Because we don't know where your grade will be for sure. But once we get to week 4, if you're just a little off of what you're trying to do and you've put in, I can tell that you've put in the effort, we'll come up with something for you, whether or not it's redoing, some posts or something like that, or doing a little bit of extra credit work in some way that's applicable to the topics that we've covered in the class, and make sure that you can get some additional credit. Okay? Any questions on that, Tasha, Michelle? Okay. So last thing, just want to make sure that we're clear, because it seems like I always have somebody in every class, every single mod, that we get to the end of the mod and they say, the professor was just really hard to be in touch with. And I say, well, I hope not, because that's something I want to be available and accessible at any point. Having said that, I do have a day job. I work as a financial advisor, a certified financial planner for Zions Bank here in Utah, and so I help people with investments. And I have that day job during the day. Then I have kids. I'm balancing a lot of things, just like you all are, right, with life. So if you call me and I don't immediately respond or can't answer the call, it's not because I'm ignoring you, I promise. It's just because I can't get to the call at that point. So you can leave me a quick message, but the very most convenient way to communicate with me is definitely by email. And that's why I say email is best. Give me an email. I'll get back to you within a day, and we'll get you a response if you've got questions or concerns or something like that. And we'll be able to communicate very easily that way. I also don't mind a quick text. If you've just got something brief, just make sure if you do text me on my cell, which is the number that I list here. If you do text me, just make sure that you state who you are, right? Because I'm not going to have you saved into my phone as somebody that I will recognize. So just introduce yourself, just, hey, this is so-and-so, and then let me know what's up. So a quick text is real easy. Email is great. Phone call is okay, but it's definitely not as convenient and a little bit harder for us to talk. Usually it ends up being kind of a phone tag thing because I'm having to call in between meetings or whatever I'm up to, and so it's a little more difficult that way. Any questions or concerns there? One more quick thing on communication. A lot of people will use, like, for example, I'll post an announcement and they'll respond to the announcement, or I'll post a grade, feedback on your grade, and then they'll post a response to the feedback. That's fine, and I usually catch that, but I encourage you to just zip me an email with that information instead of responding to an announcement or instead of responding to a grading feedback. Just put it in an email to me. And the reason I say that is because every once in a while I'll just miss those responses. I don't get a notification. I have to look through each thing line by line or grade by grade, to find your response. And so sometimes I miss those, or at least I have missed those in past classes. A little more foolproof if you just email me an email and I've got it in my inbox and I make sure and respond to it. Okay? All right. Pretty straightforward, similar to probably other classes that you've had. One thing that might be a little different about this class is I might speak a little bit faster than some of your other professors have in the past. I just figure we have 60 minutes once a week is all. I like to go through content fairly quickly. I'd rather, end, a few minutes early and really cover a lot than go really slow like I had with some of my online professors and feel like I was sometimes wasting my time because they were going so slow, okay? So that's just a personal preference thing for me. I realize that for some of you, you'd rather I go much slower. I understand that, but that's just a we talk about traits in this class, right? That's just a trait of mine. I like to go as fast as possible, get through as much material as I can. I'll try to involve both of you tonight, as much as I can, ask you different questions, have you be involved. But if you ever have anything that comes up as far as a question or concern as we're going, as you think about it, just put it in. Don't worry that you're going to interrupt me or get me off track. I'm watching our chat box the entire time, when I'm going through the slides, and I'll respond right in the midst of what we're doing, no problem. That doesn't bother me at all, okay? All right. So this is what we've got for this week. As I mentioned, one of the most important things that we can accomplish every week as far as the sessions are concerned is to make sure that you both, anybody who shows up to the class, anybody that is reviewing the session at a later time, feels perfectly comfortable, okay, and confident that they're going to be able to ace, if they'll put in the effort, that they're going to be able to ace the coursework for the week, right? So I'm not going to go over checkpoints because those are only 5 points apiece and they're pretty straightforward. You just read the material and then you answer a quick question, right? So we're not going to go over the checkpoints. I just strongly encourage you to start a pattern right now, if you haven't already, to have a certain time of the day, if possible, either first thing in the morning, night before bed, whatever it is. Have a time every day where you just have it. You just go in and you do your checkpoint every day. It's worth enough of your points, in a class like this, and it's important enough, and it also gives you extra credit if you'll do enough of them, right? And so I always found, that you've got a half a letter grade of extra credit that's possible through checkpoints if you'll just do them every day. So that's a great way to create some cushion, for the score that you want, if you're willing to get in there and be consistent with it. So I'm not going to, spend a lot of time on checkpoints. I'm not going to go over each one, as I mentioned before, but I just wanted to point that out, that it's enough of your grade that I think it's important enough to start a consistent pattern and just get in there every day, before lunch, whatever it is for you. It could be in the middle of the night, just whatever is easy and whatever gives you the opportunity to spend just a few minutes, get to that question and be done with it. So this week, as far as the instructions for the discussion board, the only coursework that you have beyond the discussion, beyond the checkpoints is your discussion board, right? We talked about no quizzes, no assignments, but the discussion board is the key element to your grade in this class, in this particular course. So this week's discussion requires you to interview at least one person, but preferably more than one, some friends and family potentially, and have some interaction with them about traits and strengths that they see in you. Okay, so this could be fairly interesting. Obviously, it's going to require for some of us that we're willing to take, maybe even some negative feedback, right? Tasha, nice. Whatever. Everybody's going to tell you good stuff. Don't worry about it. But I would encourage them. I would say something like this. If I was speaking with somebody, I would say, hey mom, whoever it is, hey mom, I need some feedback for a class. It's asking me to ask you, what are some of the traits that you see in me? Okay, what are some of the personality traits that you see in me, both negative and positive? Okay, I would actually ask them to give you both negative and positive. Okay, because a lot of people are going to focus obviously on what's positive. They don't want to say anything negative. But I would encourage them to try to come up with something, not so that it's a negative conversation. That's not, I don't want them to beat you up, and make you feel bad or anything like that. That's not the point. The point is just to get a full assessment, right? So both sides. and that's awesome, Michelle. Most of us, I was just going to say, if I asked my wife, to be both positive and negative, she would have no problem, right, with both sides of that coin. She could give me plenty of negative things, and she could give me maybe a few positive things if I'm lucky, if I've been nice that day, right? So anyway, I think it should be an interesting exercise. Yeah, if I'm lucky. Which some days I don't know that she could come up with anything, unfortunately, because yeah. Anyway, so the point is though to get both, right? And to get both sides, and so if you're getting just all the positive from somebody and they're being nice and that's great, I would just encourage you to find a few more people, to ask and see if you can get some different perspective on both the positives and the negatives, because the more you get on this, I think the more interesting the discussion board will be. It'll be a lot more interesting if you've got more feedback than it is if we just got one person and their perspective. Okay? So, any questions on that first part of the discussion board, which is for your main post, do some different interviews, just casual, you don't need to set up a time and do something really formal, just in conversation with a few people, just ask them to please help you, assess some positive and negative traits for yourself. Now, part of that discussion board obviously will be your feedback, right? So I don't expect you to just put what people said and have no say in kind of your feedback about it. I mean, if somebody says, you're kind of mean, actually, you're kind of a mean person, which I'm sure no one will say that about anybody in this class. But if that were a comment that somebody said, I'd be interested in having them, obviously describe that more, right? Give you some more detail. But then when you put it on your discussion board, I'd love for you to kind of give feedback to it, not to argue with it, and not to disprove it, but maybe potentially, give us some perspective, give the rest of the class some perspective on why that might have been the case that they mentioned that. So if you look at the discussion board so far, we've got some great initial posts. Some people in the class have already posted. I don't know, Michelle or Tasha, if you have, but there's a couple very good posts already that basically, these people have gone out and asked somebody and they've given them some good feedback, both negative and positive. And then, it was a good opportunity to kind of describe, maybe why that person said what they did, which is kind of interesting too, I think. It's a fun exercise, hopefully, for people to go through that. Okay, so that's the first part of the discussion board, is to do those interviews, to give us some feedback, give the class some feedback on the board, and then give some feedback on your own for yourself, right? Some self-assessment information. Can you use a recent argument to illustrate negatives and positives, Tasha, is kind of one of your, yeah, sure. That'd be just fine. So maybe somebody has pointed out some negative things to you recently in an argument, and if that's the case, you're welcome to use that, of course. That's the idea. I would just be careful to make sure that if you're going to use that, Tasha, that you also do some interviews too, that you also have some conversations with people, because I want people to come up with some positives that are, and I want you to have the opportunity to hear from some new people or some different people on that, right? So most of us could critique ourselves, right? Most of us could say, okay, here's some positive things about myself. Here's some negative things about myself. That was a great question, by the way, Tasha. So most of us could come up with some of that self-assessment information on our own. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at, right? Most of us can come up with that list. One of the illustrative things about this assignment, or interesting things about this assignment, is getting others' perspective, right? Not just what we think about ourselves, but what other people think about us. Okay? All right. Should be pretty interesting. Could be, we could learn some things as far as how people think about us. And, but most of us, there aren't going to be any surprises. And I would just strongly encourage everyone to be, just be candid and be honest about, both negative and positives as much as you're willing on the board. Obviously, no one's going to force you to put things that you don't want to put. If it's too personal, or if it hurts too much, or if it makes you feel yucky, to even think about it, don't worry about it, right? Throw it out. Doesn't even need to be part of the board this week. But if you're willing to and can go through and be candid about some negatives and positives, I think it'll be a fun opportunity to hear and sort through some of the perspectives other people have. Okay. So then when we get done with that first post that needs to be in by Wednesday, so you've got one more day, right, to talk to a few people, maybe some coworkers or family members over the next day or two. But then the feedback, okay, on these more, as I've mentioned a few times, more substantive feedback, right? We don't want just 1 or 2 line responses to people's feedback. I can do that because I got to give like 40 responses every week as the facilitator of the class. But for you all, if you're only going to do 3 or 4 comments, you have got to make sure that your responses are at least 50 words. They've got to be substantive. They've got to have more content than just, hey, good job. Hey, I like this. It's got to be more than that. And one of the things that the board actually talks through in the instructions is how to review, okay, in your responses, how to review the coursework for this week, which is on professionalism, some of the content from this week, and give some feedback to your peers and self-assess yourself regarding professionalism as well. So a way to integrate in that topic as well within your responses, in addition to that first part about your traits. Okay? All right, so any questions on that, refer back to the instructions. Any questions or concerns beyond that, once you've looked at the instructions and read through them, just zip me a quick email. We'll get through it, no problem. Don't worry about it. Don't stress about it. It's not a hard, there's not ever going to be a hard load of coursework in this class. Just say that up front. It's going to be pretty straightforward, pretty easy. I don't ever like to say that because sometimes people think, okay, it's easy, so I don't have to do much. I still want a lot of effort right on these discussion boards, but as far as, relative to like accounting classes that I've taught or finance classes that I've taught, this is going to be a fun class, and it's just going to be an interesting class to be able to go through these exercises and try to learn and gather as much as we can to be excellent, when it comes to interviews and when it comes to working for somebody and trying to further our careers. Okay? All right, so any questions about this week, any concerns about this week before we move on to some content tonight? All right, we're doing good so far. Thank you, Tasha and Michelle. You guys have been great so far. Appreciate it. All right, let's keep going here. Okay, so here's a little outline on what we want to cover tonight. We want to talk a little bit about personality, what that entails, what that is, what forms us as far as our personalities. Pretty straightforward stuff. Then we'll talk about values. Then we'll talk about self-efficacy. You're going to see self-efficacy a little bit this week in the information and the reading and on the discussion board. So we want to define it, tell you what it is, kind of describe it, talk about it a little bit. Then it's not really a terminology that Michelle, Tasha. If the three of us were sitting over some pizza today for lunch, most of us, very rare would the word self-efficacy ever come up, right? So it'd be a good opportunity for us to discuss that and learn something new tonight, maybe. Then we'll talk about professionalism, which is basically the topic of the reading for this week. Okay, so professionalism is the topic of two different articles that are part of your reading this week. And then we want to talk about career success principles for a few minutes, interview process, being an employee, how these different things that we've talked about, like personality, value, self-efficacy, and professionalism, how they really come together when it comes to getting a career, first of all, and then once we get a career, feeling like we can move up in that career and be successful in that career. And actually, I say move up in the career, I misspoke because I'm well aware, and I understand that there are a lot of people who have no desire to work up, right? Work up the corporate ladder or become a manager or something like that. They just want a good job. And for them, a good career would be to have a good job that's stable, that they feel like they do a good job and have fulfillment from, right? So it's not necessarily about working up the corporate ladder, but just feeling fulfillment from our careers. That's an important thing for all of us, right? All of us could get more fulfillment out of life in general if we got fulfillment and enjoyment out of our job, right? Out of our career. And so we want to have success, whether or not success for you or me is to move up. It's up for you, Tasha. But maybe for the next person, it's just to feel secure, right? And so everybody kind of defines success differently, but we want to make sure that we feel comfortable and confident in the workplace, both to acquire that job, right? But then after we acquire that job, to succeed at that job, whatever we define success as. So we'll talk about a few keys or principles to doing that. Obviously, there are lots of resources, lots of books and online tools that you can find that would add to what I have to say tonight. A lot of what I have to say just has to do with my own personal experiences, as far as hiring and firing people, as far as, managing a team of folks, as far as recruiting people, and as far as being an employee myself, over the past 13 years as I've worked at different banks and different financial institutions as an investment guy. So anyway, so we'll have some different things to look at and consider when it comes to that part as well. Any questions on the different topics? I know, we're going to go into each one of them more deeply, but even before we go into each one of them, anything that sticks out or concerns that you have about any of these topics? Okay, well, let's start with personality then. So I want you to think real quick about how, if I were to ask you, just real quick, what is personality? Tasha, we'll define that here in just a minute. So I'll give you that in just a second. But if we were to talk about personality, how would you define personality? What is personality to you? So sometimes we use it in different ways, right? If we were to look it up in a dictionary, somebody might say personality is something like, if I say, boy, that Tasha, she's got a lot of personality, right? Usually that's a pretty positive thing, right? And usually it means you got kind of like a lot of spunk and energy and wit, right? That's what that definition would be. When we talk about personality in this class, we're really not talking about wit and spunk, like, wow, that person has a lot of personality. But it could be that way, right? That could be part of it. This definition is more broad, right? This is more broad. This encompasses everything that makes you, just like Tasha said, right? So it could be positive, could be negative, like I think you're meaning, Michelle, right? Could be positive, could be negative, could be good things, could be bad things about who we are and what makes us us. Okay, so personality is just like you said. We're going to use a very broad, broad stroke when we define it and say that it's just whatever makes us us. When somebody describes us, they're describing our personality. Okay, when somebody describes us, they're describing our personality. So we're not talking about physical features, though, right? We're not talking about skinny or tall. We're talking about when somebody describes what we're like, right? How we act. Those are personality traits, right? Like we talk about. Yeah, appearance is different, right? Good. Okay, so there's some things that personality is and some things that personality is not. And then there's also different definitions for personality that we're not going to use today, like we talked about earlier. We're using the very broad definition that just defines who we are and how we act. Okay? And Tasha, Michelle, this might be, simplistic, but where do we get our personality from? How do we define our personality? What defines our personality, excuse me? So we've got culture, we've got, cultural issues, environmental issues, hereditary issues, friends, family, good. All very, very formative when it comes to our personality. And some of them, I think you'll agree, can be more formative and more influential than others, right? So for some people, that hang out with their friends all day as a teenager, their personality sometimes will start to morph into what their friends are like, right? And you might meet them and say, wow, this person doesn't even act like the rest of their family. And it might be just because of proximity to somebody or a friend that they hang out with a lot, more than even their family. And so the influence from family or friends, or influence from our culture or our environment, can sometimes just be subject or can be dictated by how much, right, exposure we have to that. Okay, so if I grew up, for example, in downtown Idaho Falls, which I did, I grew up in Idaho Falls, and I grew up in kind of a poorer area of Idaho Falls, right in the main part of the city in Idaho. That, in many ways, defined how I act in different ways, right? It's kind of my cultural and environmental, my exterior, influences, Tasha, that you referred to. Having said that, if somebody met me, they might not have a clue, right, that I was from Idaho or from a small town like that or from a poor area, unless they really got to know me well. On the surface, more of my culture, more of my race, things like race and culture might play a bigger part of what they infer my personality to be. And then the people I hang out with, right? My own family, my spouse, my brothers, my sisters, those types of things would maybe define for other people more about me than where I grew up. The interesting thing about that, and this is where this week's these interviews that we're going to do this week are fairly interesting to me, at least. Okay, and that's because many of your friends and family will infer personality traits onto you based on what they think your family or your friends have as their personality traits. So we just assume that's that if you're friends with 3 or 4 other people and they know those friends, they might assume that you're similar to them in a lot of different ways, right? Which could be true. It might also be false. reality is, okay, for a lot of us, those formative years, what we call those formative years, kind of that 0 to 18, right? Those years, our family, in most cases, and our friends had a lot more to do with what we end up being as far as our personality than probably anything else that happens in life. Now, that doesn't mean it can't change, and that doesn't mean that people don't change over time or become something different. But those years, that 0 to 18, there's been a lot of research and studies done that say, hey, the influences that have significant influence on you during those years, okay, that's why we call them formative years, have a significant impact on the rest of your life and kind of the trajectory of your personality and traits for the rest of your life, okay? So a lot of our friends and family might not even know really what our formative years were like, and so some people might incorrectly assume personality traits onto us that aren't real. And that's why it's very interesting when we do these interviews, especially with people that we just kind of have a casual relationship with, maybe a colleague or somebody we've worked with for just a little while or only been friends with for a little while. It might be a very interesting exercise to find out what they think, right? Because it might be way off or way different than what we think our personality traits are based on what we know to be our formative experiences of life. Okay? So very good job, though, Michelle, Tasha. Both of you gave the bulk of what influences. We could come up with a couple more, but those are the bulk of what really define us and form us as far as our personality is concerned. Now, can we change it? I've already alluded to the fact that we can make changes. Okay, we can make some changes to personality traits that we have. However, I would like to point out that it's very difficult sometimes, and in some cases, it's nearly impossible, actually. So I don't want to make anybody feel bad here. That's not the point. But if you've got anything, let's say, for example, you come from a situation where your parents did something a certain way, and they just always did it that way. Many of us find that when we become adults that it's very difficult to stop whatever it was that they did, good or bad, right? Maybe they had bad habits that they did, and we just kind of pick up on them as we age. Or maybe they had good habits and we pick up on them, and it wasn't something that we even think about. It's subconscious. We just do it because that's what they did. So some of those things happen subconsciously, and those subconscious things that we kind of form habits around become very difficult in some cases to change. I don't know, Michelle or Tasha, that you can think of anything like this, but sometimes there are things that kind of annoy us, right, about ourselves. And we just find it very difficult to break away from that or change it because it's just something that we've always done a certain way, right? And that's just who we are, we think, and it's very difficult to change. Now, there are some things that we can change, obviously, a lot easier than others. But for some of us, it's a very difficult process. Being set in your ways. That's consistent across the sexes, Michelle. All of us have things that we're set in, right? That we're just hard to, and it's not even necessarily that we have a stubborn personality, right? Some people would say, well, you're just stubborn. Not really. I mean, there are people who are very easygoing, very flexible. They feel like they're it's easy to change. That it's not because they're stubborn. It's just because they've got habits, and habits become very difficult to adjust and change over time, especially those ones that nag us and annoy us, right? Those are sometimes the most difficult ones to overcome or to adjust. How do we change them, though? And I've already alluded to this, and maybe you guys have some feedback on this. I think for most of the research that I've done, it just comes down to setting up some kind of pattern or habit to break the pattern or habit that we have, okay? So we can talk about it every New Year's, right? We can make new resolutions, right? That say, hey, I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to start doing that. And reality is, most of it doesn't come to fruition because we have no plan. We have no plan to actually change anything from a habit standpoint, to form any new habit or any new pattern in our lives. If we are consistent about a new pattern or habit, we can then, in the end, at some point, it may take years even, at some point that pattern or habit that we create and are consistent with will break or establish something that we're trying to accomplish from a personality standpoint. And like I say, that's where it really becomes difficult because we've got to set a plan together and we've got to be committed to it and we've got to be consistent with it. which is difficult sometimes. Anything that you would add to that, Michelle or Tasha? There's a lot of literature about, ways that you can change and different, motivational things to change us, but really it just comes down to doing something different consistently, right? If we can do it consistently, then, we'll be able to overcome. Great point, Tasha. So yeah, I mean, if it's getting some help or support, a lot of times that's just that extra key to overcoming something or changing something that we needed to change. Perfect. That's a great point. Accountability, right? Sometimes a support group creates that accountability that we need to keep ourselves on track and give us the positive peer pressure, right? The positive motivation to keep going sometimes when it gets tough. So let's talk real quick about what personality traits you think breed success within a workplace environment or within your career. So what kind of personality traits can breed success or bring success within the workplace or within your career? What are some personality traits that you can think of that would help you with your career? Can you think of any? Let me give you an easy one. Somebody who is hardworking, okay? Somebody who is hardworking, right? If they'll work hard, that tends to be a success trait that's pretty consistent no matter where you go, to be a hard worker. To be outgoing, good, Michelle. To be flexible, excellent. To be willing to change, that's a tough thing as an employee, especially to accept change, because it always happens, right? We're always going to be in an environment that's going to be changing on us, and we've got to be willing, as tough as it is, to accept that change. To be dedicated, good. Another one that comes up a lot is just to be honest, right? To be somebody that's honest in what they do and has integrity. When they say they're going to do something, they do it, right? They're committed to do it. So trustworthy, perfect, similar to that honesty piece, right? And I don't know if I've got your name right, but Minerva, am I saying that right? Minerva? Welcome. I didn't welcome you yet. I didn't notice your name till just barely. We're just talking about different personality traits. We've gone over expectations of the coursework for this week, so you could catch the beginning of the session. I'll post the full session here in a little bit after the class is done. But I appreciate you being here. Thanks for being here. We're just talking about different traits, personality traits, that would breed success within the workplace or within a career. One of the things that I think is really important when we talk about these different traits, we might look at some of these and we might say, wow, I'm not very persistent, or I'm not very outgoing, or I'm not very flexible. We can all find a few of these maybe that we say, that's not really my strong suit. So does that mean that I'm not going to have success? If one of these areas is a real weak point for me, does it mean I'm not going to have much success? I think you're right, Tasha. I think most of us have some things that are much stronger than other things, right? We're not all strong at all those things, and we can get better. That's exactly right. So we can manage our weaknesses and try to improve them in different ways and try to practice and get better at some of those weaknesses. But we can also emphasize and focus on those things that we know are strengths. And honestly, not all of us are going to be good at everything. We know that, right? And employers know that. They don't expect us to be good at everything. And so there are a few basic things that they expect, right? That you'll show up on time, that you'll work, right? That you won't be lazy, that you'll actually work, and that you won't steal, I mean, there's some basic fundamental things that, all employers are going to expect. But then there are a lot of these personality traits that we can improve and we can get better at and we can exploit to help ourselves within our careers as well. So I like that. Thanks, Tasha. I think that's a positive way to look at it, right? Sometimes we get overwhelmed by all these different personality traits that we should have, right? And that maybe we're not that good at. But these are all things that we can develop over time. And all of us have been given different traits that we are good at, right? We've been told that 100 times. Maybe it's only one or two, but we've got something that we are good at. And if we can emphasize and focus on what we're good at, most times that'll breed success in and of itself within a career. to not get beat up about the things that we're maybe a little bit weak about, but to really focus and hone in on the success and personality traits that we're good at. Okay, let's go on to values real quick. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on values because really values are a big part of our personality, right? So what are they? They're different things that are just really important. They're the things that we value, right? So it could have religious undertones, right? We could value different things, spiritualism, a relationship with God, stuff like that. That could be a religious value that we have, the values that are formed based on a religion. But they don't have to be religious at all, and they don't have to be spiritual at all. People could put a very high value on honesty and being trustworthy, and that doesn't have to necessarily be anything to do with any kind of, religion or spirituality at all, right? You could put a very high value on kindness, right? And being kind and being friendly to all and being happy. There are different things that you can put high value on and that are significant values for you personally. And for everybody, if we were to list our top 10 values, our list, even between the four of us here in the class tonight, would be a little different, right? We can have some similarities, but most of us would prioritize those values a little bit differently. One thing to be careful about, especially in the workplace, is that the values of a company, okay, a culture or value at a company, versus our values, if there's a significant break in the alignment, right? If we value honesty and our company is very dishonest, or if we value being kind or good to the environment and our company is horrible to the environment, if there are significant mismatches between a corporate culture or the values that company aspires to and our personal values, it's never going to be a fulfilling work environment and a successful place for us to work. We might make money, we might make a living, but it'll be important to us at some point, if we're going to really establish a career that gives us fulfillment, to make sure that we've got a company culture, okay, and folks that they don't have to match up with our priorities, but they shouldn't have significant breaks with our values, right? And it's pretty easy to point out the big ones, right? Like as far as that I just did, like honesty and integrity and kindness and things like that. But if a company culture is just way off in left field relative to your values, it's going to be a very difficult work environment to feel like you're thriving, right? Because of that mismatch. So where do values come from? The same thing we talked about with personality, right? Our formative years, our parents, our families, our experiences, different things that we experience form values and strengthen values. Could be, like I say, religious, have some religious overtone to it. But there are a lot of different things that form our values. And everybody has different, values, like I say, but everybody would prioritize a little bit different what those values are. We've given you some examples. I've mentioned that different corporations and companies and places that you can work all kind of have their own value set as well. And don't just read their mission statement and think that you understand their values. Talk to employees there. What do they really value? Do they really value family time and being able to, be there for your family? Do they really value, the customer and really try to do the best job possible for a customer? They might say all those things, but another employee would be able to help confirm, or, in some cases say, no, that's, they say that, but that's not really important to them. So corporate culture is very important to understand and very important to be familiarize yourself with before you ever feel like it's going to be a long-term, career opportunity. And then finally, this kind of plays into corporate ethics as well, right? So, as strange as this might sound, values determine where people draw the ethical line, whether or not something's ethical or not. And to one person, what's ethical, it could be very different to another, to what's ethical to another person. Most people agree on some basic ethical standards, but when you start to really get into the weeds and go through the details, it's very different from person to person. So just be aware of that. Be aware that values and personality traits obviously are different from person to person, obviously are different from company culture to company culture, from one company to another. And that's a very important aspect when you're out there looking, for a career, a fulfilling career with who you might work for. Any questions on that? Kind of zip through that end part. We've got to get through a few more that I'd like to get through. Okay, so now we get to this self-efficacy. Tasha, I think it was you that asked what the heck is that, right? And I think Michelle, both of you mentioned this is the first time I've ever even heard of that. Not terminology that we usually use, right? So it's not something that I expect that tomorrow when you're talking with somebody that you know that you're going to use this terminology of self-efficacy. The point of self-efficacy in layman's terms, right, is defined as your own belief in your ability to accomplish something. What it comes down to is your own confidence. Okay? It's not arrogance, right? That's different because sometimes arrogance is overconfidence, right? This is just your own internal confidence in your ability to accomplish something. Okay? So where does this self-efficacy come from? It comes from having accomplished things. It comes from having outside sources tell you that you've done something well. It also comes from how we speak to ourselves. And this sounds kind of weird, but there are a lot of books, psychology books out there that talk about how we speak to ourselves internally. Okay? Do we beat ourselves up all the time? Do we build ourselves up? Okay? Most of us are pretty critical of ourselves, right? But as a general rule, are we always critical, or do we, help and build ourselves up and confirm things and celebrate, victories and accomplishments? And that's something that we can train ourselves to do better at. Okay, so self-efficacy and confidence for some people seems to come very easy, and for others it seems to be very, very difficult, right? And for most of us, it's pretty tough to improve it, right? To either we believe in ourselves or we struggle to believe in ourselves. And the good news is if we struggle to believe in ourselves, there are a lot of exercises that we can do as far as self-talk, as far as our internal communication with ourselves to help us begin to believe in ourselves better and communicate with ourselves in a positive way. One of the things that a therapist can accomplish for somebody is to help them come up with themselves the ability to believe in themselves, right? So, sometimes we just come up with our own barriers, and Tasha, like you say, we just come up with we're really our own worst critic, our own worst enemy. And sometimes it's just being able to overcome that through our own self-talk and being aware, first of all, that our self-talk is negative, and then secondly, starting patterns of positive self-talk. And it may sound, quirky or may sound silly, but positive self-talk is it's been proven. It does wonders for people as far as their self-belief and self-confidence. Okay, so if you're one of those folks that has a hard time with it or really struggles with self-confidence or self-efficacy, confidence in your own ability to accomplish, I would encourage you to find resources. First of all, be around people as much as you possibly can that build you up. Right? We none of us need people who bring us down. So find people that bring you up if you possibly can, that are positive and really build. But maybe you're not in a situation where you can do that. Your friends and family are just happen to be kind of negative, and you're not going to be able to change that, right? With certain people. So what you can do is you can start to research and start to really create for yourselves, like I say, positive self-talk to start to build yourself back up and to create a positive confidence. And we all know people, okay, when it comes to the workplace or just in life in general, that we look at and say, wow, that person has just such great charisma or confidence in their own abilities. And it's not, once again, it's not arrogance or cockiness. It's just a quiet confidence. And I think for most of us, that's a trait that we kind of envy, that we'd love to have more confidence and ability to be, just have that really firm belief in our own ability to accomplish something and overcome something. That's a great trait, and it's something that all of us can work at and get better at. So anyway, any questions on self-efficacy, what it is, how maybe we try to build it and try to strengthen it? I'd encourage all of you, right, here in the live session tonight, but also as you listen to it, to just come up with maybe one way through maybe research or maybe just one thing that you can start to say to yourself regularly. Okay, and I mean this, saying something to yourself regularly. Put it on a 3x5 card, keep it with you, read it if you have to, right? Because it's just something that you need to say to yourself. Something that is positive, that self-affirmation, that helps you to believe in yourself and have positive self-talk. And so workplace self-actualization, I was going to talk a little bit about Maslow, his laws. Maslow is a famous scientist of psychiatry, of a psychologist, and he talks about different needs that we all have, kind of fundamental needs that we have. The first one is just physiological needs. We all need food, we need shelter, we need, basic necessities of life. But then as the pyramid of different needs goes up, at the very top is self-actualization. And self-actualization is just a terminology that means that we start to aspire and become our best self, right? And really thrive becoming our best self. And I think all of us have met someone in life that we look at and say, that person, man, they just seem to be right at the top of their game, right? Doing the best at everything they do, and happy and doing a great job. And it doesn't mean their life's perfect, right? But it means that they've been able to accomplish at a high level the things that they're trying to accomplish from life. And once again, that's a trait that we all hope to do, right? To accomplish at a high level the things that are important to us. That's self-actualization. The problem is we need to accomplish those other things that come first. So if we're worried about our safety, or worried about where our next meal is going to come from, or worried about jealousy and social problems that we have, relationships that we have, sometimes we can't get past those to finally get to that point where we can have some self-actualization. So the thing to be aware of when it comes to Maslow's laws is that we have these basic necessities that we need to check off first, and we need to make sure that we're accomplishing for ourselves before we can get to that point where we are kind of in the flow and get to that high point, right? Where we can experience some significant fulfillment and happiness from life because we're fulfilling at a high level. But a lot of it just comes down to attitude, and that's why I put that, and that's why self-talk is so important. And confidence is not something that comes from some special talent that we have in most cases. That confidence usually just comes from our attitude and how we talk to ourselves and how we build ourselves up and believe in ourselves. And if there's anything we can come away from a course like this with, is a lot of that's created, a lot of that's external sources may have created it for us, but we can change what was created for us, and we can overcome some of that negative self-talk that some of us just really struggle to get past. Okay, so I encourage you all. I'd love to have people in this class come back, a few years down the road and say, you know what, school was tough. I got through it. I'm in my career, and I remember, us talking about self-talk and belief and self-efficacy. Maybe you wouldn't use that terminology, but we talked about confidence, right? And talked about how you can establish some of that for yourself and improve on that over time. And you have control on that. It's not something that's out of your control to improve. Okay, so this week's content is about professionalism, so I'm not going to spend much time. We don't have much time anyway to do it. But as you're reading the two articles this week, I want you to think through in your mind, and one of the articles is just a list of different things that we can be more professional, ways that we can be more professional. And then another one just lists out ways that you either are professional or you aren't, ways that you demonstrate being very professional versus ways that you demonstrate not being very professional. And I think all of us can go through those lists and say, okay, I'm really good at this, but I could improve on that. So another thing that we could do this week is go through those professionalism lists and just come up with some different things that we could work on a little bit, to make some kind of improvement. Don't get overwhelmed by it. Don't try to be good at all of it, but just find one or two things that maybe you can make a small improvement at, because professionalism does matter. It's significant. It's very important in the workplace. Not because everybody needs us to be always professional, right? That's not the reason. It's just because productivity and effectiveness of a workplace is significantly higher when all of us have at least some level of professionalism. When you have somebody that's just really, really unprofessional, it detracts from the ability to accomplish and be productive. So there's some threshold where we all need to have at least some level of professionalism, and that's why it's so important. And that's something we all can work on a little bit and get better at. Okay, so finally, we've only got just a few minutes to cover this, and this is probably one of the more important things. So maybe we'll go back to it in the weeks ahead and cover it some more in future weeks if we have time to. But but success principles, I listed a few. Your education, and I commend you all for being well on your way as far as the education part. Education is a success principle. It doesn't have to necessarily be a formal education, right? But it might just be learning as much as we possibly can about a particular thing that we're interested in, that we want to work on. If I'm going to go work on cars and be the best mechanic I possibly can, education is part of that, even if it's not a formal education. Experience obviously is always part of a success principle, and it's something that really irritates people. They get their education and they find that a lot of employers put a real high priority or premium on experience, right? So I'd strongly encourage any of you, all of you, to, if you don't have work experience, to just find something you can do, even if it's just a part-time job, even if it doesn't seem like it's very applicable to what you want to do for your career. Just get a job, get some work experience down. Any work experience is better than none, right? And any work experience can then be parlayed or be transitioned into any other job, right? Any job is about work, right? And about showing up and about accomplishing a task. And so all those, any job can be transitioned into any new job, right? And can be, and if we're in an interview and a potential employer's asking us, well, I see your experience here. It doesn't look like you have much experience with what this job would be. The answer is no. Yeah, it does. These jobs that I had before helped me to understand how to work in this situation, and this is why it applies to what I would be doing here, right? So, any experience is good experience as far as work is concerned. Resume, we got to work on this. We got to make sure our resume is professional looking. It's clean. It's tight. It's concise. It's easy to review quickly. There are a lot of templates out there that are decent and good. But if you have any questions on your resume, I'd be happy to review it for you. Any of your professors through the college should be happy to review it. We just want to make sure it's clean and clear, that we don't have any just grammatical errors, things like that. We want to be professional and easy to review to a potential employer, especially nowadays where almost everything comes down to just them looking through 100 or 200 resumes. You might not even get an interview if that resume doesn't look decent. Then we want to go over a couple of success skills as far as the interview process is concerned. Even after you have a job, right? Even after you have a career, most workplaces will continue to interview you, right? And so it's important to be able to look somebody in the eyes, to have some basic grooming, standards, and make sure that, you're in a decent position to do well in that interview. And one thing I wanted to mention along those lines is, I was in a situation when I started in the insurance business about 13, 14 years ago where I had no money. I mean, we were dirt poor. And, in the insurance business, you're expected to wear a suit every day, and I couldn't wear the exact same thing every day, but suits are expensive and I didn't have the money for them. So I almost everything I wore for the first couple of years in the insurance business was from a thrift store. And thrift stores have a lot of very good clothing. So if you're worried about, being able to put on that professional, outfit, or that professional clothing that you need, for that interview, go find a thrift store and get it done. Because a lot of times, even nowadays, I like to check a thrift store once in a while to see if there's a good pair of shoes or something like that. But I just wanted to mention that because I think a lot of people worry about interviews because they don't have, they might worry they don't have the right clothes. Go find those thrift stores. They get a lot of good stuff. Okay. All right. So professionalism, we talked about that, and self-efficacy. A big part of, success of your career is how professional are you? Do you have a basic level of professionalism? And then on top of that basic level of professionalism, do you have confidence in your ability to overcome challenges that come up and accomplish the task at hand? If every time you hear about a new task, you always think to yourself, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. I can't do that. If that's the first thing you say about every single new task in life, you got to turn that around, because one of the success principles that just absolutely is so essential to really thriving, in a workplace, is being able to take on a challenge or take on something new and say, you know what, I can do that. I can find out a way. And even if I can't, I'm going to do my best at it and give it my best shot. Right? So anyway, so that attitude piece, that self-efficacy and confidence is just so critical. And it's something we can all get better at, and all do a better job at. So, All right, so that's all I had for tonight. That's all the content we want to cover. We went a little bit over time, so I apologize about that. We'll try to stay right inside our hour next week. But any questions tonight, any concerns, anything about the course that I can help you out with at this point? Okay, so if not, sure appreciate you all participating tonight. I really appreciate the participation. I hope that you'll all be back next week. Have a great week this week. Make sure and let me know if you got any questions or concerns. I'm excited for this course. I think it's a great course that can really help you in a lot of different ways. It's a little more tangible. You know, there's some intangible stuff, but it's all stuff that you can work at and get a little bit better at that really help, you know, once you get into career. So have a great night, and we'll talk soon. Good evening.